So thinking back on your experience of the pilot and from what you understand EPAs to be, are there any other ways that you could explain the concept to your colleagues? Murray, Entrustable Professional Activities. Isn't that just another piece of educational jargon? What does it mean, mate?
I think my experience of the EPAs this year has been that it's provided us as supervisors, but also the trainees, with a structure and a framework and some detail about what we should be doing. That's pretty much in a nutshell what it's about. And the downside, if you call it that, is that you have to find the time to do it. But it's time that's well worth investing in.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. What about the entrustment bit? Does someone want to have a think about that aspect of EPAs? I've got an opinion on that, of course, but I want to hear you guys.
I think the proficiency levels help us to guide us towards when the colleague could be entrusted to sort of deal with a complex problem depending on the EPA. So those proficiency levels have a really good way of helping the candidate understand as well where they are.
So the descriptions of performance, what it actually looks like at the coalface, at different levels. Thank you, Naga. What about the selection of EPAs? You're advising someone on which EPAs they should select in their next rotation, either trainees or supervisors. How would you handle that conversation?
I would advise them to be realistic about the EPA that's chosen, so ensure that it is in keeping with the rotation that your trainee is doing, and that it's in keeping with your clinical service setting. I'd advise them to also discuss and reflect with the trainee how it fits into where they're at with their stage of training, and what, not just their stage of training, but what level of competency they feel they're at in terms of that particular area, be it developmental, behavioural or child protection, or population health, or broad core community child health. So really to think carefully and to be realistic, and to probably try and work it in with the trainees' plan, their career plan, where they want to be and where they think they are at the present.
Thank you, Wen. Any further comments on the that conversation about where the trainee thinks they're at?
I think it goes back to that initial meeting and the investment in time right at the outset, finding out who your trainee is, and also, what terms they've done, where they've done them, who they've done them with, and find out what experiences they've had, and then moving forward where they actually see themselves being at the end of 6 months, their sort of goal setting for themselves in the short term and long term, what their life plans are too, because often they get in the way of their career plan. So for some people they may say, look, this is what I'd like to do this year because next year I'm getting married, or I'm doing something else, or I'm going overseas, or whatever it might be. So there's a lot of other things that come into play when you're planning some of these goals for the trainees. So you have to take all of those things into account. And also often what we're doing as supervisors too, as I mentioned before, I had time off this year for long service leave, and that does impact on what trainees can achieve if you need to get alternative or other supervisors to come in and cover for you, and so there's lots of things come into play. And you have to plan. I think what's come out from a lot of the people talking so far has been how much you do need to plan ahead and schedule what you'd like to achieve during the year, and the team approach to doing that.
I like that, keeping it real and factoring in supervisor and trainee life. What a concept. Great. Now, what about, this is using the EPAs, once you've selected and you're putting them into practice, what other advice might you have for your colleagues about getting the best out of the EPAs?
I think a lot of it does have to come from self-direction by the trainee. So I think in that initial goal setting stage, I think it's important, you know, with the help of your supervisor and their expertise, to set out your own goals, because I think, you know, we're learning to become independent at the end of all of this, and I think that's really important, to know where you want to be eventually. Yeah, I think that's probably...
Is that good as a trainee? Do you,
Yeah,
you know,
it's
taking a bit of
empowering.
ownership of that? Yeah.
Yeah, and I think we need that, and I think this framework allows that to happen.
Good point. Any other trainees want to build on that thought? Alicia?
Well, I certainly found it a very useful tool, and it certainly helped me to set more concrete goals with my supervisor. I'd met with him prior to actually joining the pilot, and so we'd had conversations about what I expected to get out of the rotation and what my aims, and I'd, you know, had some general ideas. We spoke about those, but when I actually could bring this tool to my supervisor and sit down and say, actually by the end of this rotation, I'd like to be able to do this, this and this without your direct observation or supervision. Is that realistic? What are you hoping that I can achieve, and how much autonomy can I achieve within this amount of time? And they were much more useful conversations than just saying, I hope to be more familiar with this concept of diagnostic evaluation.
Yep.
Yeah.
Excellent.